Coming up on Arirang News, the South Korean government says it wants to settle the issue of Japan's new export restrictions on Korea using creative solutions. It's not only an economic issue, an official said it's the best way to maintain the region's security. Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi warns that Japan's export restrictions will not only affect the global supply chain, they'll even undermine the international community's trust in Japan as a partner. And the top U.S. diplomat for Asia is in Seoul meeting with South Korean officials about the two countries' alliance and likely also about the trade dispute with Japan. It's 4 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on our afternoon newscast. I'm Devin Whiting. Washington's top official on East Asia policy, David Stilwell, is attending a series of meetings with South Korea's top foreign affairs officials to discuss the alliance as well as the trade restrictions enacted by Japan. At the Foreign Ministry today, Stilwell met with Deputy National Security Advisor Kim Hyun-jong, Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa, his South Korean counterpart Yoon Sun-gu, and the top nuclear envoy Lee Do-hun. Asked whether the U.S. will do something to resolve the trade row between Seoul and Tokyo, Stilwell responded that Washington is willing to engage in all issues related to South Korea and the U.S. He also said he expects to see whether Washington will be able to get Seoul's support in safeguarding the Strait of Hormuz. U.S. President Donald Trump has reiterated that he will not rush into concluding a denuclearization agreement with North Korea. His remarks on Tuesday come amid strong criticism from the North over Washington's planned joint military drills with South Korea. Kim Yo-sun has this report.
North Korea's foreign ministry has condemned the U.S., saying its scheduled joint military exercises with South Korea could put denuclearization talks at risk. The ministry warned Tuesday that it could reconsider its agreement to resume working-level talks if the exercise takes place as planned next month, and it may also consider resuming nuclear tests. The North has long criticized such joint exercises as, quote, a rehearsal for war. This comes as the Pentagon announced Tuesday that Seoul and Washington are preparing a routine joint training program in August. A spokesperson for the Pentagon explained that the joint exercise has been scaled back in order to facilitate diplomacy with the regime. Meanwhile, President Trump has highlighted that his administration has made significant progress in regards to North Korea. Speaking at a cabinet meeting in Washington on Tuesday, Trump said he doesn't feel any pressure to reach a quick denuclearization deal with Pyongyang.
The relationship is very good. I think we've made tremendous progress on North Korea. And again, time is not of the essence, but I think good things will ultimately happen.
This seems to be a reaffirmation of his administration's stance that it will not rush into concluding a deal with the North. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
North Korea has warned that it might quit the nuclear talks if South Korea and the U.S. go ahead with their scheduled joint military drills. But on Tuesday, the nominee to become the next U.S. Secretary of Defense said the drills are essential to dealing with potential threats from the North. Kan Hyung-woo reports.
President Trump's nominee for U.S. Defense Secretary has made it clear that joint military exercises with South Korean troops won't come to an end anytime soon. In a written answer before his Senate Armed Services Committee confirmation hearing on Tuesday, Mark Esper said joint military drills are essential to maintain the readiness of U.S. forces Korea to cope with North Korea's potential threats. Responding to a question that asked about the value of the joint drills, the nominee added the combined exercises ensure that both countries' troops can respond together. Esper also said in case of a contingency, he will avoid unintended casualties while taking out North Korea's weapons of mass destruction by working with related agencies. He added U.S. troops on the Korean peninsula are improving their ability to reduce threats from North Korea's WMDs and missiles. Though Esper did not specifically mention a country, he said he's going to pressure U.S. allies to contribute more fairly to combined security. Mentioning Iran, North Korea, and terrorist groups around the world, Esper said America's military must be prepared to respond to regional threats. He added the enemies of Washington must see diplomacy as their best option because war with the U.S. will force them to bear enormous costs. The Senate Armed Services Committee is expected to make a recommendation to the full Senate for a vote on whether to confirm Esper as Trump's next defense secretary. Kan Hyung-woo, Arirang News.
In other news, South Korea's National Assembly held a ceremony today to mark the 71st Constitution Day. Assembly Speaker Moon Hee-sang stressed the importance of public unity and the need to revise the country's constitution to change the presidential system. Kim Min-ji reports.
National Assembly Speaker Moon Hee-sang says amending the constitution is an imperative task, calling on political parties to show more determination. Speaking at an event marking the 71st anniversary of Constitution Day, the parliamentary speaker stressed that less than a year remains until the 20th National Assembly comes to an end. He lamented the fact that lawmakers have yet to revamp an authoritarian presidential system that people called for an end to during the candlelight protests.
At this point, we've missed a golden time to amend the Constitution. If there is no determination from political leaders, we may lose momentum. I ask on the leaders to make an important decision. Constitutional amendment is the task we have at hand.
On July 17, 1948, South Korea enacted the Constitution, laying the groundwork for the country's democracy. It was last revised in 1987 after decades of authoritarian rule. That's when the country adopted a direct presidential election system and 5-year presidential terms. But there has been mounting criticism that the system vested too much executive power in the hands of the president. There were plans to amend the constitution last year, but they collapsed as political parties couldn't reach a compromise. Moon implored rival parties to work together, saying the National Assembly has made no progress on constitutional revision nor reform-related bills due to habitual standoffs.
The politics of today is heading toward tension and strife. Public trust in the National Assembly has dropped and their patience has also reached a limit. Even lawmakers are now calling for the need to adopt the recall system to penalize those that don't work, to show that women business talks to revise the constitution is a must.
Noting that this year marks the 100th anniversary of the establishment of Korea's provisional government, Moon stressed that the country needs a paradigm shift that can last the next 100 years. He called for the resumption of talks and compromises in the political arena to regain public trust, as well as finding a breakthrough to establish peace on the peninsula and supporting the economy amid growing uncertainties. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
The city of Gwangju in Korea's southwest is hosting the World Championships of Aquatic Sports, now in day 6. The city's in the global spotlight, and with so many people in town for it, there's a big variety of cultural events to enjoy on the sidelines. Lee Min-sun reports from Gwangju.
At Gwangju's Nambu University, the main venue for the 2019 World Aquatics Championships, promotional booths have been set up with various cultural programs for visitors to experience and learn more about Korean culture. Gwangju and its surrounding Jeolla provinces are well known in South Korea for their local delicacies. For international visitors to get a unique taste of Korea, a local traditional food organization has prepared an exhibition displaying ceremonial table settings for various rites of passage.
Since Gwangju is hosting an international sporting event, we prepare traditional ritual tables for everything from birth celebrations to wedding ceremonies, so we can promote Korea's food culture. Locally prepared food and 7 dishes that represent Gwangju were selected. I hope visitors taste all of them.
The booths are not for eyes only. Visitors can also enjoy some hands-on experiences. Athletes here for the championships can get a unique glimpse of Korean culture, scoop up some souvenirs, and more importantly, take home some unforgettable memories.
We are from Germany and we are water divers. We had a chance to look around and maybe have a view of the culture and what it's different to Germany, to our home country. And it's very interesting to have a look to the other culture you have here.
Between the competitions, we have a little bit time to go out in front of the pool and can see a lot of things, what they do here. And we got some gifts from Korea and I really like it to go around next to the pool.
Visitors can also chill at an outdoor beer festival and enjoy Korean street food from food trucks at a nearby convention center. The beer festival will run throughout this weekend and for another week in August. Dance and music performances are also lined up at the Athletic Village and at other main venues during the weekends. Local artists have also put together an art exhibition to celebrate the 2019 World Aquatics Championships being held in their part of the world. An exhibition called Dive Into You displays around 40 paintings and art pieces by 13 emerging artists from the area to celebrate the international event. Young artists channel their imagination and artistic flair to give international visitors a clearer idea about what Gwangju and its people are all about. This art exhibition will run until July 28th at Eunam Museum of Art and is open to all visitors free of charge. 이민선, Arirang News, Gwangju.
And one of the most popular summer festivals in South Korea is back. Starting this Friday, Seoul will host the Hangang Mongttang Summer Festival on the banks of the Han River. There'll be more than 70 programs and events over the next month. Those include camping, water sports, cruises, movie screenings, paper boat races, a night market, and more. Most of the events are free, but check the website for more information. The South Korean government has reiterated that the trade dispute with Japan should be resolved constructively, and both sides should move ahead in a future-oriented direction. A government source told foreign press in a briefing on Wednesday that Seoul hopes to settle the issue through dialogue and creative solutions. The government believes that's the best way to maintain solidarity between Korea, the U.S., and Japan, especially amid the numerous challenges in the region. The official also said that Japan has to honor its promise made at the G20 summit in Osaka last month that it will continue to uphold the principles of free trade. He warned that such actions violating WTO rules will break the global value chain. There will be dire consequences, he said, from those trade sanctions, which in his words will have adverse effects on semiconductor lines at companies like Apple, Amazon, Dell, and Sony. They'll also affect billions of consumers around the globe. South Korea has once again called on Japan to take back its recent decision to restrict exports to Korea of materials needed for the country's key industries. Those measures, it's believed, were ultimately taken because of political and historical issues between the two countries. The South Korean government says those measures will not only weaken the global economy, but also erode international trust in Japan itself. Kim Da-mi has this report.
South Korea has once again called on Japan to retract its latest export restrictions and urged Tokyo to engage in a dialogue over the issue. During an economic meeting on Wednesday morning, South Korea's finance minister Hong said Tokyo's export curbs could undermine the foundation of the two sides' economic cooperation.
We are concerned that the Japanese move could further weaken a global value chain beyond the two countries, which in turn could damage global economic growth.
The minister also expressed concerns over Japan's unfair export restrictions targeting a specific country and underscored South Korea-Japan's long economic ties. Hong then said Japan's latest move could hurt its level of trust in the eyes of the international community. Calling Japan the biggest beneficiary of the World Trade Organization, Hong referred to the G20 Osaka leaders' declaration back in June that called for a free, fair, non-discriminatory, and stable trade environment. Seoul's Trade Minister Sung Yun-mo urged his Japanese counterpart Hiroshige Seko to maintain and promote free and fair trade. In a Facebook post on Tuesday, Sung openly refuted Seko's remarks that Japan's export curbs are intended to be a precautionary measure, not a retaliation against last year's forced labor ruling by South Korea's Supreme Court. Earlier on Monday, the Japanese minister denounced South Korean President Moon Jae-in's remarks the previous day that Japan will suffer greater economic damage should their trade standoff continue. While criticizing Japan for its lack of clear grounds regarding its export curbs, the South Korean minister commented that he is ready to hold talks with his Japanese counterpart at any time. To cope with the economic retaliation, the Seoul government said it will secure an extra budget to support industries related to parts and materials in the second half of the year. Seoul is also expected to announce its plans to boost industrial competitiveness and reduce its heavy reliance on Japan in the coming weeks. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
It's time now for an in-depth look at the global markets this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Hwangsan, Research Fellow at the Korea Capital Market Institute. Dr. Hwang, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, it seems like there's a little uncertainty about whether or not the Federal Reserve will be cutting interest rates this year aggressively, and that sent Wall Street a little lower on Tuesday. Korean stocks today also sharply lower. What's the story out there?
In Wall Street, stocks edged lower on Tuesday as quarterly results from banks added to concerns about lower interest rates dampening their profits, while comments from U.S. President Donald Trump on trade also dragged down Wall Street's major indexes. The S&P 500 closed 0.34% lower, while the Nasdaq fell 0.43%. Stocks moved lower after Trump said there was a long way to go with China on trade and threatened to put tariffs on another $325 billion worth of Chinese goods. The major indices briefly pared losses after Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell reiterated that the central bank would act as appropriate to keep the U.S. economy humming, but they later moved back to their previous levels. Asian shares drifted off on Wednesday as anxious investors awaited more earnings reports from corporate America, while the dollar held firm in the wake of robust U.S. retail data and a Brexit-driven dive in the pound. Japan's Nikkei declined 0.31% and South Korea's Kospi lost 0.91%, while Chinese blue chips dip into the red.
Well, tomorrow the Bank of Korea will be meeting to decide on interest rates. Some analysts think the BOK might cut rates sooner than later in view of the Japan export situation. What do you think?
The Bank of Korea is under growing pressure to lower its key interest rate after U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell strongly hinted at a rate cut later this month. I expect the BOK is likely to lower the benchmark rate in August at the latest if the Fed cuts its policy rate this month. The Korean Central Bank is scheduled to have rate-setting monetary policy committee meetings in July 18th and August 30th. The central bank does not have a lot of options now if the Fed lowers its rate this month. Two of the BOK Monetary Policy Committee members have continuously mentioned the necessity of a rate cut. Korea's growth rate has also been underrated by a number of global rating agencies. However, the BOK seldom adjusts its policy rate before the Fed's impending monetary policy decision. The BOK is more likely to lower the policy rate after the uncertainty on the Fed's decision is removed.
Yeah, speaking of uncertainty, Korean businesses are worried about a possible second round of trade retaliation from Japan. What might that look like if it happens?
As the second round of economic retaliation by Japan becomes more realistic, the tension in domestic IT industry, electronics, battery, and automobile electric parts makers, which are mainly importing Japanese materials and parts, is also rising. First of all, concerns about the semiconductor industry, which has been hit harshly by the first round of trade retaliation, are greatest. Domestic semiconductor manufacturers are worried that Japan will expand the range of export control items to silicon wafers, which are essential for semiconductor production. Battery makers for electric automobiles, such as LG Chemical, SK Innovation, and Samsung SDI, along with producers of precision electronic components, such as LG Innotek and Samsung Electromechanics, could be the target of the second round retaliation. The reliance over Japanese parts, supply of LG Innotek and Samsung Electromechanics, for example, are 15.8% and 13.8% respectively, which are more than twice as much as Samsung Electronics.
Well, we'll have to keep watching that story, Dr. Hwang. That's where we'll have to leave it for today. Thanks so much for making time.
Thank you.
Now, the Korean government has officially given approval to apps used for hailing rides. These apps have been popping up left and right, but they've faced fierce opposition from taxi drivers. The plan announced on Wednesday looks like a compromise. Oh Soo-young reports.
South Korea has given the green light for mobility platforms to operate legally as ride-hailing businesses. The Transport Ministry on Wednesday announced the plan to legalize car-sharing mobility firms as a form of taxi business if their drivers acquire taxi licenses and the firms contribute a slice of their profits for societal purposes. The ministry also said it will promote the growth of new taxi franchises such as Waygo and taxi hailing services like Kakao T. Up until now, firms like carpool platform Tada have operated using loopholes in the transport law, which banned non-taxi drivers from earning profits except for those with 11 or more passengers. With the rapid growth of such ride-hailing services and the traditional taxi industry's fierce opposition to them, the government has been seeking ways to reach a compromise. The government says its new plan aims to nurture the growth of diverse players and services in the taxi industry, all while protecting traditional businesses.
The government has continued discussions with platform firms, during which we again confirmed that any party should be able to compete fairly within the legal framework. The benefits must also be enjoyed by the public.
The platform company's contributions will be used to support the traditional taxi industry and boost welfare for its drivers, such as pension payouts. Taxi drivers have long feared new players in the market would lead to job cuts and reduced earnings. To further stabilise their income, the government says it plans to implement a monthly salary system for taxi drivers from 2021. It will also encourage younger people to enter the industry by easing licence qualifications and boosting pension payouts for drivers over the age of 75 who decide to retire. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The World Trade Organization has ruled in favor of China and against the U.S. over the tariffs America uses to counter Chinese subsidies. These are duties dating back to the Obama administration. The ruling means China could, after assessing the damage from the tariffs, apply sanctions to the U.S. Choi Young has this report.
On Tuesday, the WTO's appellate body ruled that the U.S. violated subsidies and countervailing measures agreement. In 2012, China took to the WTO and contested U.S. anti-subsidy tariffs on its exports, such as solar panels, wind towers, steel cylinders, and aluminum extrusions. In the ruling, the appellate body said that the U.S. must accept Chinese prices to measure subsidies, even if the U.S. sees them as distorted. The United States Trade Representative released a statement saying the ruling, quote, ignores the findings of the World Bank, OECD working papers, economic surveys, and other objective evidence, all cited by the U.S. China's Commerce Ministry also posted comments on its website saying the ruling shows the U.S. had, quote, repeatedly abused trade remedy measures, which seriously damaged the fairness and impartiality of the international trade environment. On Monday, U.S. President Donald Trump admitted the trade war between Washington and Beijing has weakened his personal friendship with Chinese President Xi Jinping. According to Politico, Trump bemoaned during a recent White House event that Washington has been losing an estimated $800 billion a year to China. If China decides to impose sanctions based on the latest WTO ruling, it needs to enter a new round of legal measures over the value of damage to its trade. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
Facebook says it won't launch its cryptocurrency, Libra, until it's approved by the government and regulators, amid various concerns over the digital coin. At a U.S. Senate hearing on Tuesday, David Marcus, the head of Facebook's subsidiary, Calibra, said the virtual currency won't be offered until it has fully addressed regulatory concerns and received appropriate approvals. The launch of the new digital coin has triggered bipartisan concern in the U.S. due to the possibility of criminal use, privacy issues, and impact on the financial system. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.